today, I'm really going to briefly share with you what my thoughts on creativity is. And I have a title of this, is I call it unique creativity. This really has a lot to do with my argument about how do we educate, what teaching should be. So I want to emphasize the unique piece, because today in schools, almost everybody is talking about creativity. You have it in the 4 C's, you have it in the 6 C's. Nobody hates creative people. Everybody loves creative people. At least we pretend to do so. I'm quite concerned that we have treated creativity as a blanket, that if we can train people to become creative and then they produce things that are creative. But actually, I want to emphasize that creativity is a unique individual process. Real meaningful creativity has to be based on a lots of time, lots of knowledge, lots of work in that domain. I call productive creativity. So today I want to just share with you, I don't want to talk for too long, but because I treat Michael, your center, very seriously, I created a number of slides. So I have to go through the slides. I'm sorry, I normally don't do slides during Zoom meetings, but I because I respect you guys so much, I did some slides. So I have to go through this. So let's start thinking about, how do we learn anything? How do human beings become anything? And the theory that came out of Matt Ridley many years ago, of the book called Nature via Nurture. That really gets me thinking, we have the idea that nature, what we're born with, interacts with nurture, with our experiences. So it's not nature versus nurture, but it's our natural habits, our natural potentials get enhanced or suppressed by our experiences. And experiences matter, and so does nature. So that is a very significant view. If I want to give you a simple example, is that you can be, let's say you're born to be 1.7 meters. I know in Australia you still do meters. You're born to be 1.7 meters. That's the capacity potential. But if you do not have enough food, you may only grow to be 1.6. So you see how this connects. But if you're also born to be 1.7, then no matter how much food you have, you're not going to become 2 meters. So that's how this interaction goes. So in psychology, there are different kind of theories. We have the theory that, for example, multiple intelligences. Many of you are very aware of this. Howard Gardner's 1980s proposes that we're born with different intelligences. I endorse this idea, but I'm not necessarily okay with the different categorizations. There may be more intelligences. We just don't have a profession or a bunch of jobs to fit that. There may be many more, actually, but this normally has been, I would say, misunderstood as learning styles, different things. It's actually human potentials. What every human being is born with. Some of you, for example, are more biased towards language, which will make you learn language faster. Others may be biased towards musical, others may be nature, others may be spatial movement. And there are different kind of things. Now imagine you have the music talent. That is, you are more likely to recognize music. You're more likely to follow patterns, to understand a rhythm. You're more sensitive to sound, unlike some people are truly kind of tone deaf. They have no understanding. If you have that talent, the second thing is that, do you have the experience? If you are born in a family, you have that this experience, your musical talent will grow. If you are born in a family where you have no music, you may never develop that. Some people may have special talent and they can access that. However, with that musical environment, no matter how talented you are, it's very unlikely you're going to develop that. I always thought I could have become a Justin Bieber, but never realized, because I was born in the Chinese village, no arts, no music, too bad, So that's how it happens. But if you do not, don't get me wrong, you actually can learn something even without the talent. That's what human beings are. Human beings are very creative. We're born to be creative. We could learn something, but you can never get there. Everybody can learn to paint, but not everyone can become a Picasso. That's where constraints. So then you have also other differences, that ties into the personalities. Some of us, we have the certain inherent tendencies towards certain personalities. Of environment shapes us up. For example, some people are extremely outgoing, others are much less. We can go through this a lot. Since I don't have time to go through this, you can also have different desires. Some people desire power. They want to influence others. They very much want to do it. They can be 90% power, maybe 10% savings. And some people are extremely, for example, curious. They just want to know. They're very curious. That's why you have Donald Trump and paparazzis. Curious people become paparazzis if they're lucky to do that. And so Donald Trump is the one who has a lot of interest in power, but has very little curiosity. I don't think he wants to know anything, So that's the thing. So we have this interesting combination of this. So these are the basic things. Now imagine that you add a diverse experiences. Some people are born into different societies, different cultures, different communities, different families that value different things, that has a lot different things. In my tiny village, I think most people in my village were more Buddhism. They were not interested in anything. They just think about it, forget about it. I did not have access to a lot of things, but this diverse experience reshape human beings to become unique individuals. That's why when you have students come to your class, come to your school, they have different strengths, they have different passions. Then when you use one set of curriculum to judge them, you have trouble. Some of them are going to be way behind in some domains. Others may be way ahead of other domains. This is why the reason our schools are in trouble, because we try to homogenize a group of very diverse students. And when we're not successful, we put them into special education. That's what happens. And when creativity, should we think about creativity the same way? And here's what we think about creativity. I know many of you use different domains to different definitions. Creativity typically has been accepted as a two-factor definition. What makes something creative? It has to be novel, something new, and something valuable. But recently, there are different people to challenge the idea, should it be valuable? Should it be, and judged by who? If you create something, you say, okay, that's creative, but is it valuable? We've seen the artists, let's say Van Gogh, when Van Gogh became more popular, way more popular after his death because of the World War. But he wasn't as valued. However, was his creating valuable? How did that happen? If society's changed, people arise to recognize his creativity. So here's some, actually I was reading this book, Robert Weisberg was really rethinking about how creativity maybe should not become valuable, what should become more about novel with intention. So his argument is, well, let's forget about the value, talk about intention. However, what I'm more focused on is the idea of being different, surprising, novel. That how can you come up with something that's novel in your field? That's greatly novel. You know, everybody is creative as the basis. You know, you're familiar with Ron Baghetto's 4 C's, or those things. But if you want to be creative in a domain, assuming you're not just crazy, you just come up with something that's bizarre, that's strange. If you want to come up with something that's meaningful and novel, what would it take? What would it take? So here's something I learned a while back. It's called, there's a book called the Talent Code. If you want to become good at something, creative, novel, but recognizable. So we're talking about really the kind of pro-C, professional creativity at a higher level that can be appreciated and valuable. So I think that has to do with how good you can be. And Daniel Coyle talking about 3 T's. If you want to become good at something, I like this quote: talent, that is the innate abilities, time, and teaching. I kind of Coyle that one. It's really, we know you want to be good at something, you got to spend a lot of time on it. And you must have some talent. This is actually interesting balance, which I talk a little bit in this book. In my book, I came up with 2 or 3 years ago. So if you have the same amount of time, let's say 10,000 hours, if you spend 10,000 hours on something you have talent in versus something you have no talent at, what would it be? So that means if you have a talent, you will learn faster, you'll reach higher. If you have no talent, you can still learn something. This is what our educators, as educators, we always emphasize: everybody can learn something. Everybody can truly learn something, but we have to be very careful. If you have 10,000 hours, if you spend on something you have talent in, it's different than you spend time that you have no talent in. And the last point is called teaching. This is very valuable. Teaching, I think it's best teaching is to encourage people to try something different and not to force them to repeat what you try to teach them. So that's very significant, okay? So then comes down to I wrote the book about what works may hurt. So any methods you apply to something, they are in competition. Education people, we love to have children to develop a whole set of talents and skills and knowledge. But that doesn't work very well. As I just now explained, if you are talented in something, the same amount of time will get you very far than if you spend the same amount of time on something you have no talent in. There are also other elements. Even when we talk about, for example, there's some PISA data. This is quite interesting in speak up when you think about outcomes. The PISA data shows the fear of failure is more positively correlated with PISA test scores. That is, if children are afraid of failure, they get better scores. Do you want to cultivate that? Oh, but in creativity, you want people to have confidence. So they believe they can do something. And then, of course, we have other same thing, PISA data, life satisfaction. You know, creativity requires us to be more relaxed, more interested in our work. But in this way, you look at PISA data shows life satisfaction and performance, academic performance are negatively correlated. So as educators, if you think in your school, do you want to have children to have a miserable life, but they have better test scores? What would you like to do? What does that mean for creativity? Another thing is that goes to the idea about, does same approach work for all the children? So you look at this is a typical way of we calculate how one approach may work or not. So this correlation 0.5 is quite great. But if you look at this, in this quadrant and this quadrant, the students are the ones who benefit, it's positive. But look at this 3 students and this bunch of students, they're negative. So this is like now when we're running COVID vaccine. It can, if it helps, some people but hurt others, should we release it? Actually, in medicine, education is trying to copy medicine. We are very careful about safety. We don't want, if you have a medicine, if it killed 10 people but saved 20 people, should you release it or not? What would you do with it? So this, again, in education, whenever you look at one approach, it may support the creativity of this group of people, but may hurt the creativity of this group of people. That's another way to think about it. Then when I talk about, this is the idea about creativity, critical thinking, collaboration in our schools, the 4 C's. We are also going to be very careful with this. So do we want all our children to have the basic collaboration, creativity? Again, time is a constraint in schools. So you have, does everybody have to be like this? Or can we have people like this? They're extremely critical thinkers and collaborative people, but not very creative. Or can we have models like this? Someone is very creative, but very little, collaboration. So my view really comes to summary in this book. An education that aims to cultivate creativity needs to be unique. How do we treat unique individuals in our schools? How do we help our students to have a creative tendency and creative capacities, but built in strong knowledge and skills in a certain domain? So this is what I've been thinking. I've been thinking a lot about how do we shift our curriculum? This is a big challenge, I think, for all of us in education, educators, school leaders. Can we think about a school curriculum that consists of maybe 30% as a national curriculum? Australian curriculum can only run for 30%. Then each school may be taking over for another 30% or 20%. Each school should have its own uniqueness, represents its unique culture, but you add another 40 or 50% that belong to the students, Students can today truly develop and evolve their own learning. Can we allow that? Can we allow students to develop based on their own strength and passions when they come to school? Creativity built on something like this will become unique and will make great sense. So you might think, here's what I would end with this. I believe there are any kind of 3 elements in our education. The first thing start with the what of learning becomes student autonomy. Students do not only have voice, choice, they actually own their own learning in collaboration with the national and school curriculum. And they will do that. And in terms of learning how to become more creative, it's like what I call authentic product-oriented learning. That students start with identifying problems worth solving, and then develop and create solutions to that. And learning today, especially during COVID and after COVID, has to become global. We have a global partners, global resources, and a global markets to appreciate our learning in that regard. So this is what I've been arguing for, that is students as co-owners of their own learning. Students are productive members of school and society, but also they are dealing with global issues. So coming back to this is ultimately what unique creativity will come from. That is, every student has a unique profile of passions, strength, abilities, but aimed at using their strength and passion to solve other people's problems. So human beings will become an interdependent society rather than a society that we have winners and losers. So that is what I have to say. And I'm really happy to take on questions or discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Yong. That's fantastic kind of provocation, bunch of things to think about. I'm going to kick off with the first question, and I'd encourage everyone to put any questions they have in the chat box. And what we'll do is we'll throw to those questions. We might get you to ask them live, depending on what they are, or if they're simple, I can just read them off the screen. So just feel free to type any questions in that you might have. Yong, that kind of specific profiling in some ways flies in the face of the kind of large standardized testing regimes that we have at the moment. And I wonder what you would say to school leaders and teachers about what that might look like and what parts of their practice might have to change to make that possible.
Well, thanks, Michael. I think the first thing schools really have to change is the view of the curriculum. I think the government, of course, like, you know, Australian ACARA should change its prescription. I don't really believe, in general, you can prescribe a successful profile for all students. I just don't think that's possible. You can prescribe a floor curriculum for all students to reach, but that's very basic. That's for the public good. But individual students truly have to, in the future, become uniquely their own. In the time that you have standardized tests like NAPLAN, you know, ATAR, you know, all those kind of things, I think schools have to also recognize if you start with a student's strength and passion, no matter what that might be, first grade, think about that they are much more likely to actually use reading and math, and they actually might do better on those tests because they are more engaged, they are more interested, instead of trying to impose on them the same kind of things. Another thing I think needs to change, schools need, I really would like schools to change this idea, is that students do not have to be grouped by age. I think, the group by age just doesn't make sense. And we know it doesn't, but, actually it does make some sense. It makes us the management more easily, but actually children can explore and will explore different things. How many students are disengaged from our schools? I will start actually probably by also probing those students who are not benefiting from the schools today.
Chris, I might ask you to unmute and ask your question if you like. Chris, are you there?
Thanks very much, Michael. Yeah, hi, Dr. Zhao, how are you? Thanks for your interesting presentation there. Look, I'm really passionate, like all educators, around how to implement the change that we all know needs to happen. And I sometimes find myself sitting back with a lot of interest and, hearing the great ideas. And I wonder if we could put our finger on the #1 reason why it's so difficult to implement the changes. What is it that's really holding us back from doing what it is that we all know needs to happen, which is engage our kids with more interesting curriculum?
And Chris, by the way, are you a teacher or school principal?
I'm an educator. I'm currently not in schools at the moment. I'm consulting outside of schools.
Well, I mean, I think there are many #1s. You probably know this better than I do, I mean, in this context, I would say the #1 thing is that a lot of teachers have this. They care about students too much, I guess. So they are fearful if they don't teach them, if they don't force them to learn something that's deemed useful by the government or by some other authorities, they feel like they're not doing their job. You probably notice a lot of teachers teaching very hard of all their students, 35, 40 students, they work very hard. I've been to many schools, actually many Australian schools. You see a lot of schools that are very worried about students. They put students on the NAPLAN mode. These kids will move in, this will not. They have the data walls, you know, there's data, everything. I think that's probably the biggest problem. We need to relax. I think I would like teachers to retreat from looking at data. I would not look, because any of the data you collect on individual students, a very narrow view of what the students can be. And or narrow view, also short-term view of what students can be. If a teacher can, okay, begin to look at the students as individual human beings who will grow up to be something, and then they look at the curriculum. I would love to have teachers, you know, when they do lesson planning or PD, they'll be discussing their students, not discussing the curriculum. I would love to see more teachers focusing on what each individual student's growth is like, rather than trying to say, okay, have they mastered our subjects? And remember, all the subjects, the curriculum were created to develop opportunities for students to learn, not necessarily the imposition of the curriculum for students. I'm sure, Chris, you will have better, you know, answers than I do, but I would like to see teachers retreat a little bit and change our look. We should look at the students first before we look at the curriculum. Our job is to help every student grow rather than simply imposing the curriculum.
Yeah, thanks, Yong. Thanks, Chris. Might go to another question from Amanda. Amanda, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, everyone. I just love the concept of a global campus. I'd love to hear a bit more about how you envisage that might work.
Well, thanks, Amanda. Let me give you some examples. I'm running a bunch of experiments in different places. For example, we are having, we have a school in China right now running a part of my program, and they are trying to develop the ideas about kitchen. So trying to develop English language learning materials. Remember, they are learning English, but they're developing English language materials about Chinese cuisine. Then we have students from around the globe and talking to them, giving feedback to them, because they're developing for foreigners, not for Chinese students. Okay, so that's one thing. Another program I just developed in the summer is called HIP, H-I-P, Human Interdependence Project. We want students to solve problems, but the problem should be identifying how human beings are interdependent. I think that's really crucial for the future of our society. So we had students, this was a 2-week program. We had students in Australia, in the US, in Colombia, Argentina, and China get together, and they each have their own local community, and they identify, solve problems, but they also have a global connection. So they are relating to each other. We're going to run our second, HIP more advanced in January. If you're interested, and you can email me, I can put you in touch with the people who are running that. So students will be, next time we're trying something different. We're going to have one instructor. If you have students, by the way, if any of you guys have students who don't like your school, they can all join this. They can get credit, all those kind of stuff. Because I really want students to say they will be studying almost together, online and offline, from the same group of people, but they're in different countries. So the idea is that I want people to live a life, a global life, because as you know, Amanda, wherever you are, we're global. Right now, the pandemic has shut us down, but has also opened us up. If you notice this thing, right? You probably have been in touch with more people than before, in your school right now. But why shouldn't our students be in touch with others? Anyone can learn really from any place now, but it has to have a purpose. And that purpose is truly for us to become a global citizen. I think creativity always needs an audience. You're creative for whom? And that audience should be global. Creativity also is collaborative. You are collaborating with whom? If you have some unique strength, if you're really good at something, You may not, nobody may like you in your school, but you may have a lot of people who like you from the internet. So that's I think it's broad in the possibilities that makes it work. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda. Yong, I know you have to go in a few minutes, but one question I have, which is we're about to go into term 4 in Australia, in probably the most difficult year we've had to face across the world in terms of education and so many other areas. Can you, for the school leaders and the educators who are thinking about the right now instead of the, what might be, can you give us a sense of what those educators can do practically in their classrooms to kind of start to work towards the kind of vision that you've outlined today?
Well, Michael, I'm typically not a person to give immediate advice. My interest is always trying to encourage people to think. I think every educator, I trust that every educator has the desire to be innovative, to be creative. If they truly buy into our mission, they can come up with that different ideas. However, since you ask me and I respect you, I will give you some suggestions. I think, well, we can start by thinking about, truly, as Amanda was asking, how do we connect globally? If you get online to a search, global projects, you probably find thousands of them. And and everybody's eager for you to join them. Or you can always start one on your own. Start something global, start something connectivity. And the second thing I think you can shift, a lot of teachers can do, is truly like start this personalization. In a class, ask your students, give them the curriculum, give them what you want to teach. In the beginning of the semester, ask them. You may have students who already know this stuff, then give them something else to do. You don't have to teach everybody. Teach fewer students. Become personalized with them. You may have students who say, okay, I don't need that, but I need some help. Then you change your students. It's such a stupid mistake to make to teach every student in a class today. Students can do something different. And someone can do it online, some can do differently. Don't really overestimate your power as a mechanical instructional machine, but do not underestimate your power as a human educator. When you build a relationship with your students, that lasts forever, better than your teaching. So build a relationship rather than trying to do the instruction, and curate resources for that. Then for schools, I really want to encourage school leaders to look at the lowest 25% of students, the ones who are not getting anything out of your school, the ones who might disengage, who might drop out. Find something to do with them. And finding something to do with them is asking them what they would like to do. Create something for those students.
Okay, great. Your comment about relational educators is so apt. Yvette says in the chat, and I know she's a relational educator because she taught my kids, and that is, she's one of the wonderful relational educators my kids have had over the years. But she says, we in New South Wales work with the child's interests and passions in preschool, and then basically drop that approach 5 weeks later when they enter kindergarten programs. I think, even though it's a comment, I think it's really apt. And Julie might even touch on some of that work that happens in early childhood that basically dissipates often when they get into kind of so-called formalized schooling. Helen, do you want to unmute and ask your question, which will make the last question?
Yes, thank you. This is really interesting. Now, some of you know me, some of you don't, so I need to declare that I work with ACARA and I'm their arts curriculum specialist. For international people, you may also be interested to know that the indicative times for delivering the arts in Australian curriculum range from 4% of available teaching time to the grand total of about 8% at the end of the years of compulsory schooling. So we're not working with a lot of time. And I'm really interested in what's being said about the possible mix of, you know, Australian curriculum at the moment is supposed to take up 80% of available time, and it's a framework. You cannot walk into a classroom and teach from Australian curriculum. It really doesn't work like that. So what I'm interested in, particularly in the arts, is how can we use that framework to explore some of the ideas and to empower teachers to take on the ideas that are being discussed in this forum. I think they're really powerful. I think they're really valuable. But what are some ideas? What are some strategies? How do we give clues in the curriculum?
Well, Helen, thank you so much. I know Akara is going through a curriculum review.
Yeah.
I gave Akara advice before it was in Akara, many years ago. So I've been following Akara for a long time. So I think, you know, if you heard, you know, you heard me. I think it's important if Akara is a great framework, is out there, but do not impose it on everybody. So the same thing with students. Some students may enjoy it for 2% of their time. You may see students enjoy it for 80%, 90% of the time. Why don't we allow that to happen? So I think right now, imposing the Akara, the framework on everybody is truly actually a mistake. So I'm not sure the specific strategies. It will require governments to change. However, if we have schools who are interested in this, they could allow individual students to customize the curriculum for themselves and then drastically boost, you know, arts in their life. But then you may have some students who just said, okay, I'm going to take 4% or 3%, and other students, you know, that I'm going to do more in STEM, you know, science, math, you know, so that would be different. I think it's my whole point today is, Helen, is really to say, allowing individual students to personalize their curriculum. I think any framework in the curriculum can offer a framework, but try not to impose on everybody. But every government has the right to demand certain levels of exposure. So you may have, let's say, 30% of students' time are exposed to Akara curriculum, but then beyond that, they can go do much more, then go do much less.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, you, Michael.
John.
Thanks, everybody. I think I've taken all my time. And if you're interested in discussing with me about this, talk to Robin and Michael. And now I have not been able to make it to Melbourne yet. I'm supposed to be teaching in Melbourne, but have not been able to do that. I hope I'll be able to do that soon.
Okay, Yong. Well, thank you so much. When I meet people who talk about school transformation, which is one of the areas I'm very interested in, they say to me, oh, well, I spoke to Yong Zhao and he said to me, I have to make a difference. I have to be the person that makes the difference. We need to get out there and make a difference. And I think one thing that your talk today and certainly your body of work has taught us is that it's not just good enough to have these thoughts, it's actually doing them in the classroom, in our systems, in our schools. So thank you so much of reminding us of that today, and enjoy the rest of a sunny Portland afternoon, sunny Oregon afternoon.
All right, thanks. Take care, guys. I'm sorry I have to run to another meeting. Okay, enjoy the rest. Enjoy Julie. Bye-bye.